Alright, y'all. So today I want to make a very quick review of Stranger Things Season 5, the final season of the TV show, so to speak. I'm going to finally get the chance to review all of the season. I didn't want to review it because they kind of released the episodes in a very strange fashion this time around. And I was kind of waiting for the whole season to come out to kind of review the whole package, so to speak. But yeah, I'm gonna be reviewing season 5 of Stranger Things, the final season. I mean, it's kind of crazy to say that too, the final season. It's almost like we've come full circle in this moment with a show that's been going on for almost 10 years. I mean, I've already mentioned this in previous reviews, but I mean, Stranger Things came out, like the first season came out back when I was in high school, man. Just beginning high school. And it was just so strange, like from that time period till now, almost 10 years later, it's finally ending. Kind of a crazy full circle moment when you think about it. That being said, I wanted to give you my thoughts. I got the chance to watch it all, and I'm going to give you my honest opinions. I'm going to give you my pros, my cons, my mixed elements of it, to kind of give you a little bit of a Cliff Notes version of my opinions on this season. It's a decent send-off to the series, I would say. There's many elements of it that do work. There's many elements that don't work. It's not as strong as season 1 or season 4, in my frank opinion. It's better than season 3. I really can't tell you right now off the top of my head if it's better than season 2. But that being said, it's an overall decent send-off. It's not like, for example, a lot of people online are going to make you believe this is as bad as the ending for Game of Thrones. Trust me, it is not as bad as the ending of that the god-awful way it ended that TV show. But that being said, there were some pretty big missteps for sure. So it's a mixed bag. All right. Now, obviously, I probably didn't mention this in my other reviews, but full disclaimer, since the season just came out recently, full spoilers. So if you haven't seen season 5 of Stranger Things and you want to, do not watch the rest of this video. And if you do watch the series, come back to this video so that you know full context what happened. Alrighty, so now let's start out with the pros. I'm going to kind of start out with some of the superficial stuff and then get a little bit more into the story. VFX-wise and visual effects-wise, this season is top-notch. I would expect so, since Stranger Things has basically been the flagship show of Netflix for the longest time. But the VFX, like always, is really top-notch. I was actually very impressed with the level of CGI and special effects that were used here. And many new character designs, the worlds, all look really interesting. I think the most impressive VFX composite shot, so to speak, is the Mind Flayer monster. Like I said, this was Vecna's fortress. The Mind Flayer kind of transformed into a giant spider thing in the Abyss world. And it's really cool looking. It looks disgusting. It looks gross. And the way, of course, all the other main characters have to fight it. It was really cool. And I really enjoyed it. And I think it was a really interesting part of the TV show. Vecna's design, top tier. I liked his design in season 4, don't get me wrong. He kind of reminded me a lot, actually, of Swamp Thing, weirdly. But this feels way more interesting. It feels more armored, more tentacly. He just looks better, in my frank opinion. So, Vecna's design is top tier. And, of course, all the action sequences are top tier. They're really good. I wasn't really... I wasn't necessarily blown away. Like, it's not like The Raid in terms of action, but the action sequences are really good, and the special effects are top tier, like always. Also, all the cast members. I think, for the most part, they do a pretty good job with their returning roles. It's kind of crazy watching all these kids grow up throughout the seasons, but, it's part of the TV show over 10 years. And they all do pretty much, for the most part, really good. I like the actor who plays Finn, like always, really good. Dustin, really good. The guy who plays Lucas, really good. Even Will. Now, I will get into Will's stuff later, but I thought the actor did a pretty damn good job of this role. The lady who plays Elle, or 11, or Jane, she's pretty good. I will say that her acting range is kind of stilted a bit in this TV show. She kind of, at points, has the same expression on her face throughout the whole series. But like I said, I thought she did a better job in season 4, but she was pretty good here. All the main characters, Hopper does a pretty good job. Steve, Jonathan was okay. I will say this: I do feel like his performance is a little muted. The same thing with Nancy's, but pretty good. And overall, like I said, overall, great performances, and the actors all do a really great job. Like always, I don't usually have complaints with the acting for the most part. Elements of the story this time around are really interesting and really good. This obviously follows up on the cliffhanger of the last season, and we really get into some crazy stuff here. The main characters are kind of going into the Upside Down, doing these so-called crawls, trying to find Vecna, stop his master plan, because he's kind of, from what I remember, this takes place basically a year after the last season, so not too much time has kind of transpired. Also, the military is involved in Hawkins now, and they even have a base in the Upside Down, which is all crazy. I'm going to get into that part about it, which is one of my criticisms of this season. But I like a lot of these new elements. I'm going to get into some of the twists. For example, I'm going to get into some of the good plot points that are brought up here that I really liked. Now, let's get into like I said, they drop some bombshells throughout the season, and characters grow and change throughout. I really like how Dustin and Steve's relationship changes and progresses and gets better throughout the season. And there were some really good, heartwarming moments. I think this season really strives when it gets into some of the character moments, and it really does a great job at them. I thought Steve and how they dealt with the fallout of season 4 was really well handled. I like Finn and Elle's relationship, Lucas and Max, especially the big reveal of Max coming back was amazing. I think that was really well done, well executed, and I like how in a lot of ways she has to escape through memories, and it's a very dramatic sequence. I don't know, like I said, if it reaches the highs of like how she escaped in season 4, but it was really well done. Also, this time around, there's just a lot more crazy sequences. It's all-out war, so to speak. The Demogorgons attacking people. It's really cool stuff. And there's some standout moments. For example, when Mike's mom, she like blows up something in a laundromat, killing a bunch of Demogorgons. That was admittedly a pretty badass moment, especially for her character. I'm really surprised how much she was actually a little bit more involved in this season compared to the last ones. And of course, Mike's dad is hilarious, like always, even though he's barely in this season. Other things. The big twist. Now, we actually learn a lot more. Big questions are answered in this season, which I really do appreciate. And a lot of people have, divisive opinions about this. But the Upside Down is basically revealed. It's revealed and it's explained. The big explanation in sorts is that the Upside Down that we see, that we've been exploring throughout this whole series, was created by Elle when she tapped the Demogorgon when she was doing her mind stuff, opened a portal, and it created a duplicate copy of a 1983 Hawkins. Now, the Upside Down in Hawkins is essentially a wormhole barrier. What the hell does that mean? It's essentially a bridge between two big worlds. Our world, Earth, and another big world where the Mind Flayer is from, the Abyss. And the Upside Down, in a sense, is holding everything between these two worlds together. If you destroy the Upside Down, the link between these two worlds breaks away, and it basically, goes away, essentially evaporates in a wormhole. And that's the big explanation. Now, a lot of people were mad about this because it was such a weird thing for the show to do. It's essentially, and I will say this. There's parts of this I really do like. Parts of it I'm a little bit iffy about. The parts that I'm iffy about, I do like the overall thing that it's essentially a wormhole. It's a bridge between two worlds. That's pretty unique. And I'm going to be frankly honest with you. Not a lot of science fiction stuff has done something like this. They could have easily, a lot of people wanted this to happen, that the Upside Down could have been another dimension. It could have been something that was just an alternate Earth that gone wrong or something. And while I do think that is maybe a little bit of a logical reason for explaining it, I do think that explanation, that trope has been done many times in science fiction and fiction stories. I haven't seen one where this upside down, this place is essentially a barrier between two worlds. That's unique. I haven't really heard too many stories use that to explain their dystopian worlds. It's interesting. The only thing, though, I don't like about it, and it kind of, like I said, parts of it I like, parts of it I'm not so sure about, is that the way that the upside down was built up throughout this whole series was a super interesting, fascinating, dark place. But since we find out that it's essentially a bridge between two worlds, it feels like a little bit of a waste because it's just a stepping stone to this new world called the Abyss. Which the Abyss, like I said, the way it's kind of set up in these explanations, like, well, the Abyss is really the truly foreign and alien world. The Upside Down is just kind of a stepping stone to that. And that kind of bothers me a little bit because I feel like, the explanation does, I think, a little bit decrease the impact and the mysteriousness of the Upside Down. I don't hate it. I think it's really unique. I think that it's something new and fresh that I haven't quite heard. And parts of it I really do like. I think as a science fiction nerd, I do like it. But I do think parts of it don't work. So I'm a little bit mixed about it, but I do overall, I'm on board with the idea. I do like it. There's other elements too. We learn more about Vecna and his whole plan. Now, we find out that his whole plan is essentially he's going to combine the Abyss and basically somehow, as a result, destroy the Upside Down and merge it with Earth. Now, I'm not really quite sure how these two worlds would have smashed together. I feel like a lot of media does this where they collide the worlds together, and it's kind of confusing to me because it's like, well, as a process, like I said, physically, wouldn't both of these worlds be destroyed as a result? Like, there wouldn't be any kind of merge. It would just be destruction. But I will say this, there is a huge magical, science fiction element to all. It's not like a Transformers Dark of the Moon situation where Cybertron's coming to Earth and he's in the atmosphere and it's like, what is it going to do? You're going to destroy Cybertron and Earth as a process. There probably is, like I said, a mystical element to it that would have magically merged maybe through the portals. Who knows? And, Vecna's plan is he wants to create a more perfect world. And it's, like I said, I was expecting a little bit of a deeper plan, but that's fine. It works for me, and it's a decent plan. Now, we also get to learn a little bit more about the Mind Flayer. We find out also that Vecna has an interesting backstory, which we all found out in Season 4, but we get a little bit of new details. We kind of get in a way, I kind of like how in Season 4, it was kind of implied that Vecna just got his powers by himself. Here we kind of learn more about how he actually got his powers, which is he touches this Mind Flayer fragment stone thing that this guy is freaking out, and he clearly knows more than he's letting on. And it's also implied that the Mind Flayer is working with Vecna, and Vecna is accepting it completely at his will, and he wants to do it. It's kind of implying that, like, oh, he was at his will, he was a vessel this entire time, which I always felt like that would be really lame. I've always felt it way more interesting to be Henry and his motivations doing it. But they do, like I said, it's kind of implied, it's kind of shown that he's doing everything on his free will with the Mind Flayer. So it's a little bit of an interesting motivation. I have more questions for sure about this whole sequence, and the problem is they don't really go into depth with it, and I really hope they explain it later on. But, like I said, it's an interesting element of it. How they defeat Vecna is fine. I think Will coming in at the last minute to save them, so to speak, and the whole revelation that Will has powers, I forgot to mention, was a huge pro to this season. I felt like it gave him a lot more to do because Will in a lot of the seasons has been kind of just languishing around, sometimes as a beacon for events to come. This season actually gives him something more to do, and I really appreciate that. And I think it was really cool he gets powers, so to speak, even though he's drawing power from other people. It was really cool and interesting. I was a huge pro for this season by far. And And in general, I think a lot of the characters are all very interesting. Their dynamics are very interesting. Um, Trying to think what else. I also like the fact too that other characters get involved with the characters' plans, like the scientist guy who's been throughout the whole series coming back here. That was really cool. I've always figured at some point he would know about the real origins and the Upside Down, and it's kind of cool he gets introduced in this season to all this stuff. And I think the plan is really cool, and I think we also get a good amount of the Upside Down in this season. Like I mentioned, the action's pretty good. The plot is pretty interesting. I'm not really a physicist, but having this sort of dark matter or some kind of matter that's in the center of the Upside Down holding together was really interesting. I thought it was a really cool, and like I said, a little bit of a creative way to explain this world. Like I said, you don't see a lot of science fiction things doing this. And I think the way that Vecna dies, it was good. It was okay. He gets his head chopped off at the end, and the main characters fight a giant kaiju, essentially, as the Mind Flayer, which I thought was a really cool sequence. I like kaijus anyway. And I like how Will's mom cut off Vecna's head. I felt a little bit like a full circle moment. And the other things and other ties that bring it back to the other series was pretty good. I almost forgot to mention too, Linda Hamilton's in this season. She plays, I think, general or an officer or military person called Kay, and she does a pretty good job. It was nice to see her there. But yeah, off the top of my head, I do like the general story structure. I do like how the characters move through events and figure out things. I do think the pacing is a little bit all over the place in this season, but I do think, the general story is still pretty solid. And I think it definitely kept me on my toes. Now I'm going to get into some of my problems, so-called cons, so to speak. And if I mention any pros as well, I'll definitely mention them still. I will say this. There's some really bizarre sequences and weird things. And I think the reason why this season's not as good as season 4 is I think the writing is a little bit unclear and muddy here. And I'm going to get into some really bizarre elements. I actually might as well just start out with that. There was a sequence that happens near the end of this season that I'm going to be frank with you. And I'm not coming off as I hate this. I'm not coming off as a bigoted and hating LGBT, I can't say the word, gay people. But it's a bizarre sequence. Now, at the end of the season, Will it's a very weird sequence. Will, by this point, we find out he has powers. He has more of a central role in the story. And he kind of gathers up all these characters together. Now, it's built up as, like I said, it looks like it's going to be this big revelation. And, like I said, he's inside Vecna's mind, in the Mind Flayer. He has had all this personal relation to the stuff that's happening on the other side. It's built up like some big reveal is going to happen. And I guess in a lot of ways it is. But then Will just says, I come out and I'm gay. And I'm going to be honest with you. It's a bizarre sequence. It's really strange. And I just I kind of paused the episode. I'm like, huh? That was it? Now, granted, you also have to remember, this takes place in the late 80s. Coming out as gay, especially during the AIDS epidemic, probably was a more taboo, important thing, I guess, to a certain degree than it is today. Because I'm going to be honest with you. Coming out as gay is just, I think, more commonly accepted, and especially since a lot of movies and TV shows in Hollywood in the past few years have been pushing this diversity message. It just doesn't feel as surprising, as shocking as the show makes you want to believe. And the show takes a good amount of time to talk about this whole Will becoming gay thing. And like I said, I guess in hindsight it makes sense. If you look at the previous seasons, you didn't really seem that interested in a girl's. I do feel like, personally speaking, the way he was talking to Robin did hint something, but that's besides the point. I didn't hate this decision, right? It doesn't ruin the character for me. But why are you giving so much time and so much precious screen time to this whole... I'm going to be honest with you. This just could have been a simple exchange between characters. It didn't need to be such a big thing and a big reveal to the audience, in my frank opinion. And they even devote some of the time in the finale to it. And I'm like, who cares, right? I mean, okay, cool. Will's gay. Can we move on, right? I just think it was a bizarre and frankly bad part of this season. And in general, too, there's just some unclarity about Vecna's plan in the story. Like I said, Vecna needs these 12 children to merge the two worlds together. It's not exactly explained specifically why he needs these children. It's implying that like they have easy minds and that these kids are empty canvases and that Vecna can imprint on them, so to speak. Or at least give them ideas and influence them. But that's not enough. Like I said, that's not a good explanation. Why does it have to be these kids? These kids have to mean something beyond just their empty canvases. And I really didn't understand that part of his plan, and it's not really explained beyond the whole, oh, well, kids are empty-minded and they can be influenced. No, these kids have to mean something more than just doing that. Doesn't make any sense to me. And the whole worlds merging thing, I already kind of explained it. I'm not sure how that would have worked physically, right? And Vecna's whole motivations, especially with the Mind Flayer Stone getting powers, that's an interesting detail to his backstory, but once again, needs way more explanation. And there's, like I said, some weird other sequences. There's also the big reveal at the end that Elle possibly died. And I thought that was a good plot point to a degree that Elle possibly died. And like I said, it's left ambiguous that she could have survived, she could have died. That was a good element to it. I just wish there was a little bit more build up and payoff and full circle moments to her character in this season, which I felt like season 4 had already accomplished most of them already. But yeah, like I said, I think, I think her character was good. I did like the element that she possibly died. It did give some finality to the story, but, a little bit more build up and meaningful things about it could have been added. Trying to think of some other cons. The final battle. Now, I did mention that the Mind Flayer turned into a giant kaiju. That was really cool. The only thing about it is I have no freaking idea how these characters took on that monster. They go on the cliffs and they start attacking it. And it's like, I'm going to be frank with you. Ridiculous they survived. All of them. The Mind Flayer should have easily destroyed that cliff, that mountain, regardless of the fight between Vecna and 11. I've seen plenty of kaiju movies where Godzilla would have destroyed these fools immediately. And there's just some situations where I'm just like, how did these characters even survive this? So I do think in a lot of ways, and like I said, even though the military are antagonists throughout this whole season, I would have liked a way or maybe a plot element that they could have used them on the side of the good guys, and possibly then would have been a much more realistic scenario. The military then could have attacked the giant monster, and it would have been much more realistic of how they could have defeated it, at least in my frank opinion. Nancy shooting her assault rifle at a monster, and it somehow gets distracted by that. I mean, and like I said, in most monster movies, Godzilla would think that's a joke. So it's kind of crazy they were able to distract it for that long. I don't know. I'm just a little bit mixed how they actually tackled that whole element. I definitely think the military needs some assist. Now, I also will say this. There's other things about this season also I don't like. And that is, of course, it really is where the season starts out in the first place. This season has a year, so to speak, I believe, or a little bit more time jump to it. And so much, you can clearly tell, so much has happened between these two seasons, season 4 and 5. For one, the portals opened up in Hawkins. The military all over this town, out of nowhere, just being frank with you. And they have a freaking military base in the Upside Down. Now, I really enjoyed the plot element where Elle finds her lost sister. That was really cool. It was a nice full circle moment because she has an appearance in season 2, and it was really cool. Or I could be mistaken, maybe season 3, I can't remember. It was really cool that she came back because I was really hoping they would use her for a future story. And it was really cool how she got a lot more to do in this season. And the military were holding her. That makes a lot of sense why she maybe disappeared. The only thing is, like I said, they have a freaking base in the Upside Down. I'm sorry, but I would have liked to know more about that, how the base was built. There's just, like I said, all this stuff happens off screen. And I am not sure if they made a comic book or a book that explains some of this stuff and gives you some context to what happens in season 5. It just kind of comes out of nowhere, especially since at the beginning of the season, the characters are doing these things called crawls, and they have a whole system and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just like, where is the context and the background to all of this? It feels in a lot of ways like playing Halo 1 to Halo 2. Now, I think those are fantastic, great games. But if like I said, with Halo 2, there's definitely some elements of that game that are never explained. And that's why Halo First Strike comes into play, which was a great book that tied in Halo 1 and 2 together perfectly. And I'm not sure if there's a thing like that for Season 5 of Stranger Things. This really needed a background. I don't know, too. They could have maybe filmed like 2 episodes or something that acted as a prelude to this season, give you some important context, fills in the gaps that clearly when this season starts out, the common viewer is going to be like, huh? Especially, like I said, when they said, oh yeah, there's a military base in the Upside Down. Huh? Like I said, one of those things, I'm just like, they needed more explanation. That's one of the little critical flaws of this story. Things happen off screen, and you're just kind of, like I said, you're supposed to just accept it. And I don't know. I really am mixed about those elements. And yeah, I mean, like I said, to go more into other things about this TV show, I did think it ended pretty well. I really enjoyed the emotional send-offs. I thought that the fact is all the kids, the best friends playing D&D and Mike's basement, perfect tie-in moment from the first season. Once again, great full circle moment. This season really does great at giving nice send-offs to characters. It just, when it goes into other things, other elements, it kind of struggles. Like I said, Vecna's plan, there's some holes in it. I'm not really quite sure, especially when you learn more about his backstory. Why does he need all these kids? I don't know. And in general, it's kind of unclear if he's doing this on his free will, or is he just working with the Mind Flayer as a vessel? It's a little bit unclear. And once again, this whole new world, the Abyss, is introduced. I would have loved to know more about this new world, and it barely gets shown or talked about. And that was a really big disappointing. And like I said, too, plenty of things happen off screen here, and they really needed some background and context to this season. But yeah, this video is already kind of getting too long. To kind of wrap things up, overall, Season 5 of Stranger Things has some really good highs and some pretty disappointing lows. I think it definitely lands the plane, so to speak, but it may be missing a few wings or landing gear here and there. It's not a perfect landing. I think overall it was still a decent send-off to a series that a lot of us grew up with it. I think there was a lot of really good elements to it, some really interesting explanations, but also just some really confusing writing, muddy elements and motivations, and things that definitely could have been overall better. It's not as tight as a season in terms of storytelling as Season 4 was. But like I said, it's not a horrible season, and I do think overall it's a pretty average send-off to a pretty great Netflix series. But yeah, that's my thoughts on Season 5 of Stranger Things. Hope you all have a good day, and peace, y'all.